"Sir, you need to leave this seat immediately." The sharp, cold voice of Melissa Turner, a 34-year-old flight attendant, cut through the calm of first class. Every word was like a blade slicing into the quiet, forcing every passenger to lift their heads. In that instant, first class, usually a sanctuary of fine wine and polite smiles, transformed into a stage where every eye locked on one black man, sitting silently in seat 1A. That man was Victor Hamilton, 50 years old. He sat upright, confident, in a tailored suit, Italian leather shoes polished to a shine that caught the cabin light. On his lap lay a folded Financial Times, waiting to be opened. Everything about him radiated the presence of a seasoned businessman who had long grown used to suspicious glances and cold dismissals. But in Melissa's eyes, he was an intruder, someone who did not belong in a space she believed was reserved only for the deserving. Melissa did not lower her voice. She deliberately raised it so every passenger could hear. "This seat is for a true first-class passenger, not for you." The air froze. A wave of unease swept across the cabin. In the row behind, a white man with arms folded and an air of entitlement, Richard Coleman, 46, a long-time Platinum member, curved his lips into a smug smile. He lifted his chin like a king, reclaiming a throne. In Richard's eyes, Victor was nothing more than an intruder, a mistake that needed immediate correction. Victor remained still, his eyes calm as a lake. The only sign of storm within was the tightening of his jaw. He knew that look. He had seen it thousands of times in his life, the look that said, "You don't belong here." Outside the window, the midday sun reflected against the steel wing, casting a glare like a spotlight on a theater stage. Inside, a few passengers instinctively reached for their phones, recording what they sensed would become a story worth telling. They had no idea they had just begun filming a chapter of history. Melissa stepped forward, blocking the aisle, trapping Victor in the center of an invisible circle. "I need to see your ticket and the credit card used to purchase this seat. First class requires verification." Her voice was sharp, steeped in authority. Richard immediately nodded in approval, flashing his platinum card under the lights like a badge of class. "I fly this route twice a month," he declared, shaking his head with feigned disgust. "Never seen chaos like this. Unbelievable." Beneath the words was an unspoken message. People like you do not belong here. Victor slowly retrieved his ticket. A first-class boarding pass for seat 1A, purchased 3 weeks earlier, neatly tucked into his wallet. He handed it to Melissa without a word. She snatched it, held it under the cabin lights as if inspecting a counterfeit. "It could be fraud," she said, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "We have seen passengers use forged documents before." From seat 2B, a young woman's voice rang out, trembling yet firm. "Excuse me, this is outrageous. I'm live streaming." Sophia Reyes, 29, raised her phone high. On screen, the captions flashed. "First-class discrimination. Airline racism happening now." Viewer count spiked, 23, 67, 156. Melissa snapped, "Turn that off. This is an internal matter." But Sophia stood her ground, her eyes blazing. "No, this is racism. I will record everything." Richard chimed in again, voice loud and theatrical, as if performing for the cabin. "I have a $500 million meeting this afternoon. This needs to be resolved now. As a platinum customer, I demand priority." He stressed the word priority like a command. Victor remained silent. But when his leather briefcase shifted slightly open, a glint revealed embossed letters, Hamilton Capital Group. Resting on the folded newspaper, the headline stood stark. Skyreach Airlines merger. Vote today at 2 p.m. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A notification lit up. Board members arriving for emergency vote. Melissa clutched the ticket tighter, raising her voice as if afraid someone might miss the performance. "I still need the credit card for verification. This is mandatory security protocol." From seat 3A, an older woman whispered to her husband, "This is absurd." But she quickly turned away, avoiding Victor's eyes, just like so many who had chosen silence in the face of injustice. Victor lifted his gaze, his voice deep and hopeful. Each word honed like a blade. "Tell me, what about my appearance makes you concerned about security?" Melissa froze. Her rehearsed script crumbled. "No, that's not what I meant. What I mean is, we have a protocol. A protocol that applies only to me?" Victor's tone was calm but heavy as molten steel. "Did you ask any other passenger for their credit card?" Richard jumped in, scrambling. "This has nothing to do with race. It's simply seating policy." Victor turned, his eyes like ice. "Have you ever been asked for your credit card?" Richard faltered. I'm platinum. They know me." Victor cut him off, his voice sharp as clashing steel. "They know you because you are platinum, or because you are white." Silence swallowed the cabin. Richard's lips moved, but no words emerged. On Sophia's phone, the viewer count leapt. 200, 500, 200. Comments surged. "Sue them! Name and shame! This is racism." In that heavy air, a truth began to surface. The man Melissa and Richard believed was unworthy of this seat was the very man holding a power neither of them, nor the airline, had any idea they were about to confront. Victor remained seated, but behind his quiet eyes, a storm of authority was beginning to rise. The air in first class grew stifling, whispers spreading like fire through dry grass. Every eye was fixed on Victor Hamilton, the man still seated calmly in 1A, while Melissa Turner stood before him, her voice rising sharper with every word. "You are obstructing our operations," Melissa declared, her gaze as sharp as a blade. "If you do not cooperate, I will be forced to call security onto the plane." The words fell over the cabin like the strike of a gavel. A few passengers flinched, others exchanged looks, unsure if they were witnessing a genuine violation or a raw humiliation unfolding in plain sight. Victor did not move. He crossed his legs, his finger tapping lightly on the armrest. Each small gesture carried a weight that made it feel as though he, not Melissa, controlled the rhythm of the entire cabin. In the row behind, Richard Coleman could no longer contain himself. He leapt to his feet, voice urgent. "For God's sake, get him out of here! I have a $500 million deal waiting. I cannot lose another minute." He hammered on the phrase, $500 million, as though pronouncing a death sentence on Victor. His eyes swept the cabin for support, but instead of agreement, he met silent stares, filled with discomfort, curiosity, and fear. Sophia Reyes, phone in hand, still live streaming, whispered into her viewers, but loud enough for others to hear. "Do you see this? This is no longer about a seat. This is the naked truth, discrimination in front of our eyes." Viewer count surged. 2,000, 3,000, 4,200. Melissa clenched her teeth, scrambling to regain control. She raised Victor's ticket high, her voice pressing down like an accusation. "The ticket may be valid, but where is the credit card? First class requires verification. If you do not provide it, I will have you removed and rebook you on another flight." A murmur rose from row 3A. The older woman who had spoken earlier leaned toward her husband. "This is absurd. They've never asked us for a card." But as before, she quickly fell silent, turning away, avoiding Victor's eyes. Victor lifted the newspaper from his lap, folded it neatly, and placed it into his leather case. Then he looked up, his gaze locking on Melissa. His voice was low and steady, yet each word rang through the dense air. "Miss Melissa Turner, tell me this. Among every passenger in this cabin, why am I the only one asked to produce a credit card?" In that moment, first class was consumed by silence. A silence so heavy it carried the faint metallic hum from the windows. Melissa stammered, fumbling for words. This is a security procedure for special cases." "Special?" Victor tilted his head, his voice resonating like an indictment. "Special because I am sitting quietly reading a paper? Or special because the color of my skin does not match this seat?" The question cracked through the cabin like thunder. Some passengers swallowed hard. Others lowered their heads. Richard Coleman, his face flushed crimson, thrashed to reclaim ground. "Don't turn this into a race issue," he shouted, his voice shaking. "This is just seating policy. Policy!" Victor turned fully toward him, eyes like shards of ice that pierced through every defense. "When was the last time you were asked to show a credit card in first class?" Richard stammered. I am platinum. They know me." Victor cut in, swift and sharp as steel striking stone. "They know you because you are platinum, or because you are white." Silence blanketed the cabin. This time, even Melissa was frozen, her mouth slightly open, unable to form a single word. Sophia lifted her phone closer, her voice trembling with excitement. "Do you hear that? He just turned the entire situation upside down." The viewer count shot up wildly. 5,000, 7,000, 9,300. Comments poured in. "Expose them. He's a lawyer. This is history live." Melissa gripped the ticket tighter, sweat beading at her temple. She felt her audience slipping away from her, in the very stage she had built. But pride, the same pride that had carried her to chief attendant, still clung on. "You just need to cooperate. I can rebook you on another flight. First class. Free of charge." Victor raised an eyebrow, a thin smile flashing like the edge of a blade. "Rebook me for the very seat I legally purchased 3 weeks ago." "How generous." The intercom crackled, the ground staff's voice carrying. "Flight 892 to Seattle will depart in 30 minutes. Passengers, please settle into your seats." Richard ground his teeth, turning on Melissa, his voice seething. "Get him out. I am about to lose my contract." Melissa nodded, then bent down, her voice low but loud enough for all to hear. "If you do not leave voluntarily, I will call security right now." Victor looked directly at the name tag pinned to her chest, reading softly, "Melissa Turner." He smiled, calm yet edged with warning. Go ahead. Call security to remove a passenger quietly reading his paper in the seat he lawfully purchased. The whispers in the cabin ceased. Everyone held their breath, because in that smile they no longer saw a helpless passenger. They saw a storm of power rising, one ready to sweep away every illusion about place, privilege, and the color of skin. First class held its breath. Every eye remained fixed on Victor Hamilton, the black man, sitting motionless in seat 1A. Outside the window, sunlight struck the metal wing, scattering into blinding shards, as if the sky itself sought to illuminate the confrontation unfolding inside. Melissa Turner gripped the ticket in her hand, her voice tightening. You are causing a disturbance. If you refuse to comply with instructions, we have the authority to act under federal aviation regulations. She invoked the word regulation, hoping it would serve as a shield of legitimacy. But Victor only tilted his head slightly, his eyes cold. His voice carried, calm yet cutting. Regulation. 580. I know it by heart. It applies only when a passenger refuses to follow reasonable and safe crew instructions. He paused, letting every passenger absorb the weight of his words. So tell me, Miss Turner, how does asking me for a credit card relate in any way to flight safety? The cabin fell silent. A middle-aged man in seat 3C cleared his throat, as though to break the tension, but every gaze remained locked on Melissa. She blinked, her lips trembling, the authority in her tone beginning to crack for the first time. I am only following procedure. Procedure, Victor cut in, his voice low but striking like a hammer. Have you asked every first-class passenger here for a card, or only me? His words sliced through the air. Richard Coleman, standing nearby, scrambled to interject, his voice shaking with anger. Stop twisting the law! Just move him to economy or throw him off the plane and be done with it! Victor turned, his gaze pinning Richard in place. That look alone seemed to rob the Platinum member of his balance. When was the last time you were asked to prove you belonged in this cabin, Richard? When? Richard faltered, stammering, I am Platinum. They know me. Victor nodded slightly, a thin smile curling at his lips like the edge of a blade. They know you because of your membership status, or because you are white. Silence blanketed the cabin. An invisible blade had just sliced through every excuse. Sophia Reyes, seated in 2B, still trembling with her phone in hand, whispered to thousands watching her live stream. You see it, don't you? He doesn't need to shout. He is dismantling everything with truth. Her screen numbers spiked wildly. 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 viewers. Comments poured in. This is racism caught live. Expose them all. He's destroying them with the law. Melissa felt the world turning against her. Sweat gathered at her brow. Her hand shook so badly the ticket nearly slipped from her grasp. But pride clung on, pulling her voice back. All you need to do is cooperate. If not, we will rebook you on another flight, free of charge. That is the airline's best offer. Victor let out a soft laugh. It was not a laugh of joy, but one that cracked like a whip across the air. Free of charge? You want to gift me what I already paid for? You call that generosity? Some passengers bowed their heads, but in their eyes flickered sparks of agreement. In 3A, the elderly woman who had whispered before spoke up this time, her voice trembling but resolute. "He is right. I have flown first class many times, and never once have I been asked for a card." Her words cut a second gash into Melissa's defense. Richard shouted, desperation spilling over like a drowning man grasping for a rope. "This is not about race. Stop making it about that." Victor turned back, his voice steady, his eyes flames hidden in ice. "Not about race? Then put it in writing. Make it policy in black and white. If not, then all you are doing is bias and prejudice." His words exploded through the cabin like fireworks. Sophia whispered into her phone, "He just turned this cabin into a courtroom." The viewer count surged. 25,000, 30,000. Melissa's legs felt as though the floor had given way. Her voice cracked, part threat, part plea. "If you do not leave, I will call the flight manager. And then this will become far more serious." Victor tilted his head slightly. He did not fear. He did not rage. Every movement was deliberate, controlled. He rose, his shadow stretching over Melissa's smaller frame. His voice was deep and sharp, cutting through the silence. "Melissa, the person making this serious is not me, it is you." The cabin froze in deadly stillness. Some passengers stopped breathing. Sophia's grip on her phone tightened. Richard involuntarily stepped back. At the end of the aisle, the steady rhythm of high heels echoed against the carpet, each step like a drumbeat of war. The flight manager was approaching. A new storm was about to break, and everyone was about to witness the moment when the balance of power shifted entirely toward the man who had seemed humiliated, but who now held the leverage to bring down an entire system. The sharp sound of high heels striking the carpet echoed like war drums, each step thickening the air in the cabin. Every passenger turned to look, and then she appeared. Karen Douglas, 54, a veteran flight manager with over 2 decades of experience. Her frame was small, yet every stride carried the weight of an entire airline system. "What is happening here?" Her voice was low and steady, slicing clean through the heavy silence. All eyes immediately fell on Melissa Turner. Her face had gone pale, but survival instinct forced her to stand tall, clinging to the last performance that might save her. "The man in seat 1A is refusing to cooperate. He will not present his credit card and is obstructing security protocol. I am only following regulations." She pressed those final words like a shield of last resort. Karen folded her arms, her cold gaze shifting from Melissa to Victor Hamilton. With a single glance, she saw the contrast. Melissa trembling, Victor composed. He sat upright, eyes fixed on her, as if he were the one presiding over the hearing. "Refusing to cooperate, how exactly?" Karen pressed, her tone sharp. Melissa faltered. "He will not show a credit card. It is a mandatory requirement in suspicious cases." The cabin went silent. Then a voice rose, not loud but clear, from the back. The elderly woman in seat 3A. "That is not true. I have flown first class countless times, and never once have I been asked for a card. Only he was." The words pierced the flimsy defense Melissa had built. A few passengers nodded quietly, whispering their agreement. Sophia Reyes, still live streaming, leaned into her phone, eyes blazing. You heard it. A witness on the spot, or no more excuses. The view count surged. 35,000. 40,000. Comments poured in. She's exposed. This is systemic. Karen clenched her jaw and turned to Victor. Sir, I am the flight manager. Is there any issue with your ticket? Victor opened his leather case, pulled out his first-class ticket for Seat 1A, and laid it neatly on the tray table. His movement was deliberate, firm, like an attorney presenting irrefutable evidence. There is no system error here, only human error. I purchased this ticket 3 weeks ago. Legal, valid, complete. Yet from the moment I sat down, I was treated as someone to be verified, all because my appearance does not match the seat I occupy. His words fell heavy, like the strikes of a gavel. Richard Coleman shot up, flailing like a drowning man. Do not listen to him. I am a platinum member, and this seat was meant for me. I paid for priority. The airline's policy is— Victor turned sharply, his eyes cutting like a blade. Priority? Priority to redefine who counts as a legitimate customer. Priority to erase someone because of the color of their skin. That is not policy. That is discrimination. The blow shattered Richard's arrogance. He stammered, his face red and pale all at once. Karen swallowed hard. She knew this had gone far beyond a cabin dispute. In her earpiece, the ground crew's urgent voice rang. Report immediately. Skyreach stock is fluctuating due to online rumors. We are running out of time. Karen looked at Victor, but now her eyes no longer interrogated. They carried caution, because in his calm composure, she recognized he was no ordinary passenger. He knew the law. He knew his rights. And he knew how to make the entire world watch. Victor leaned forward slightly, his voice low but resonant, clear as a bronze bell. You are the manager? Then manage. Because if you continue to cover this up, the airline will not just lose one passenger. You will lose much more. Far more. It was not a threat, but a warning that echoed like destiny. Richard cried out again, desperate for a lifeline. I have a $20 million deal waiting. This flight cannot revolve around someone who does not belong here. Victor turned his head, a thin smile curving across his lips. 20 million? To me, that is the price of an apartment. I closed a deal 25 times that before breakfast. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A few passengers' mouths fell open. Sophia shouted into her live stream. Did you hear that? He just crushed a platinum member with the language of money itself. Views shot past 50,000. Comments exploded. He's a shark. He runs the boardroom. At that moment, the cabin door swung open. 2 security officers entered. Officer Bennett and Officer Cruz. Uniforms crisp, hands hovering near their belts. Each step they took poured lead into the air. Karen drew a long breath. Finally, they are here. But she did not yet realize this was no longer about discipline. This was about to become a corporate crisis. Victor lifted his gaze toward the officers, his eyes cold and cutting. His voice rang out, deep and resolute, like the final strike of a gavel. You arrived just in time. Record everything, every word, every action. Because this will not vanish. This will become evidence. The cabin felt suffocating. Phone screens lit up across the rows. The truth was no longer in the crew's hands. It belonged to the world. The first-class cabin door closed behind the two officers. Their footsteps were heavy, dragging with them the weight of the law. Officer Bennett, in his 40s, had a square jaw and eyes accustomed to giving orders. Officer Cruz, younger at 30, too, still carried a trace of hesitation in his gaze, like a soldier not yet hardened by confrontations. The cabin sank into silence. The low rumble of engines outside became a tense backdrop, a war drum beating steadily. Bennett swept his eyes across the cabin, then pointed directly at Victor Hamilton, seated firmly in 1A. "We received a report of a disruptive passenger. Is that you?" Melissa Turner seized the moment, her voice rising, almost triumphant. "Yes, it's him. He refused to follow instructions, would not present his credit card, argued with the crew, disrupted the entire cabin." The phrase, "disrupted the entire cabin," echoed, but it clashed completely with Victor's image. Seated upright, his newspaper folded neatly in his case, his gaze calm. Bennett nodded, his hand brushing the baton at his hip, ready to draw at the slightest cue. The cabin held its breath. A flicker of fear touched several passengers. If this escalated, the serene luxury could descend into chaos in seconds. Victor slowly lifted his head. His voice emerged low and steady, like an underground current. "Before you write a single word in your report, hear me clearly. I sat in seat 1A, a seat I purchased 3 weeks ago. I read my newspaper. I did not disrupt. I did not compromise safety. Yet I was asked for documents no one else here has been asked for. The only reason? My appearance does not match this seat." Silence froze the air. Melissa hissed, "Do not twist the truth. That is mandatory procedure." Victor turned, his eyes slicing like blades. "Procedure? Then show me which document, which written policy states that first-class passengers must present a credit card when holding a valid ticket. Put it in writing, black and white." Melissa's words caught in her throat. Richard Coleman, his face flushed, leapt in, his voice desperate, like a drowning man grasping. "It is an unspoken policy, we all know it." Victor's gaze cut through him like a laser. Unspoken. An unspoken policy to define who is legitimate, or to erase those who do not look like you. His words struck like a hammer. Richard stammered, lips moving without sound. Sophia Reyes whispered into her phone, her voice trembling with excitement. "He just demanded the policy in writing. No room to hide now." Viewers surged. 60,000, 70,000. Comments flooded. "Show the policy. He knows the law. Expose them live." Cruz glanced at Bennett, then at Victor. His eyes flickered. One question lingered in his mind. What if the man was right? Victor pressed forward before they could regain control. His voice was sharp as steel. "Do you know Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964? It forbids denial of service on the basis of race. And Section 40127 of the Aviation Code. It prohibits airlines from discriminating against passengers based on race or nationality." The cabin trembled. Some passengers inhaled sharply, as though struck in the chest by truth itself. The elderly woman in 3A, silent until now, whispered to her husband, "He is right. I have seen this before. Melissa's face drained of color. She fought to cling to authority. You are obstructing this flight. This is a security issue, Victor cut in, his tone cold as ice. Security is not threatened by a man reading a newspaper in his seat. Security is threatened by the bias of your staff. A wave of murmurs rippled through the cabin. Everyone sensed the balance of power had shifted. Sophia whispered to her stream. He just turned the law back on them. This is no longer about a seat. This is the groundwork for a lawsuit. Viewers skyrocketed. 80,000, 95,000. He's a lawyer. Sue the airline. This is history. Richard Coleman, desperate, pointed a trembling finger at Victor. Enough! Throw him off. I have a $20 million deal waiting. I will not let someone like him ruin it. Victor turned back, a thin, icy smile breaking his calm. 20 million? As I said, that is a pocket change compared to a deal I closed before breakfast. But there is one thing priceless. The moment human beings stop valuing each other by the color of their skin. His words fell like a bronze bell. The cabin plunged into silence. Inside Victor's pocket, his phone buzzed. The screen flashed. Skyreach merger. Urgent board vote. 30 minutes left. He glanced at it briefly, the glow illuminating his face, making him look like a judge with power over fate itself. Sophia whispered to her live stream, her voice shaking. He is not just a passenger. This is so much bigger than seat 1A. Cruz swallowed hard. Bennett frowned, his hand still hovering over the baton, but his eyes no longer carried certainty. Victor leaned back into his seat, his voice resonant, like a verdict pronounced. You can write in your report that a black passenger was disruptive, or you can write the truth, that the entire world just witnessed this airline discriminate openly. Choose. But remember, everything is being recorded. Every eye is watching. The cabin fell silent. Only the engines outside drummed on, like the beat of a trial not yet adjourned. The roar of the engines hummed beyond the window, but inside the first-class cabin, no one heard anything except the pounding of their own hearts. Every gaze was fixed on Victor Hamilton, the man sitting upright in seat 1A, silent yet holding sway over the entire space. Officer Bennett looked at Victor, then turned to Melissa Turner. His voice was deep, carrying the habit of a man used to commanding. Sir, will you cooperate? We need to resolve this so the flight can depart. Melissa cut in instantly, clinging to the moment like a lifeline. See? Even the police are telling him to cooperate. He is obstructing. Victor did not answer immediately. Instead, he calmly set his hand on his leather briefcase and flicked the clasp open with a sharp click. That small sound cracked through the cabin like a starting gun. Every passenger held their breath. From the case, Victor drew out a thick stack of documents, crisp white paper, stamped with a raised red seal that gleamed under the cabin lights. He laid them on the folding table, angling them so the light caught every detail. Richard Coleman leaned forward for a look, then scoffed with a derisive laugh. Don't play games. Paper tricks won't change anything. Victor raised his eyes, a fire blazing behind the ice. His voice was low, steady, but it carried through the entire cabin. This is no trick. These are the merger agreements worth $500 million for Skyreach Airlines. The cabin erupted. Gasps broke out. Hands flew to cover mouths, and Sophia Reyes nearly dropped her phone. The livestream counter shot past 100,000 in an instant. Comments flooded the screen. What? He owns the deal. $500 million merger. This is history. Karen Douglas, the flight manager, froze, her face tight with shock. You are involved in the merger. Victor closed the file gently, tapping his fingers against the cover. Not involved. I am the deciding vote. 12% stake, one golden share on the board. Without me, the deal collapses. And right now, over 100,000 people are watching live to see how your airline treats one of its own investors. Melissa's face drained of color. She staggered half a step back, still clutching the ticket as if it could anchor her to a truth already shattered. Richard forced out a laugh, brittle and shaking. You're bluffing. No one would bury an entire airline over one seat. Victor's gaze locked on him, a thin smile flashing like a blade across the throat of arrogance. Your 20 million? I could erase it with one keystroke. $500 million in a merger? I can sink it with a single call. And the market will take care of the rest. Do you want to test me? Richard swallowed hard, sweat gathering on his forehead as he stepped back, silent now. Sophia turned her phone toward herself, her voice trembling but exultant. Everyone, you heard that. He just brought down an airline with a single sentence. The viewer count surged. 120,000, 140,000. He's the investor. Unmask them all. The Washington effect. Officer Cruz, the younger of the two, glanced at the documents and whispered to Bennett. He might really be the lead investor. Bennett frowned, his hand dropping from the baton, doubt flickering in his eyes. Victor leaned back, his voice slow and deliberate, each word striking like a hammer. You are officers. You write reports. But remember, any wrong word you put down will become evidence against you, because hundreds of thousands are recording this, and when I step off this plane, I will not be the one answering in court. Karen's heart pounded. In her earpiece, the operations center barked frantically. Stock down 7%. Media calling non-stop. We need resolution now. Victor looked straight at Karen, a razor-thin smile curving his lips. You are the manager. You should know that sometimes the real price doesn't come from a technical fault. It comes from losing something called dignity. The cabin fell into stunned silence. Only the clicks of cameras, the tapping of keyboards, and the ragged breathing of those present filled the air. Then Victor's phone vibrated once more. He tapped it on speaker. A deep, commanding voice thundered through the cabin. Mr. Hamilton, this is Robert Hale, CEO of Skyreach Airlines. We have been briefed on the incident. We need to talk immediately. Shock rippled through the cabin. Every eye turned to Victor. Melissa collapsed into her seat. Karen stood frozen. Richard trembled, and Bennett and Cruz remained rooted, realizing they had stepped into a game far beyond their authority. Victor closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, his voice resonant and final, like a verdict. Perfect. The entire board can hear through dozens of live streams. So listen closely. This is no longer about a seat. This is about an airline digging its own grave. In that instant, everything exploded. No one could ever see Victor as just a passenger again. He was the storm, and the storm had only begun. The low, thunderous voice of Robert Hale, CEO of Skyreach Airlines, echoed through the cabin like rolling thunder over the loudspeaker. Everyone froze. In that moment, a commercial flight had transformed into an emergency boardroom at 30,000 feet. "Mr. Hamilton," Robert's voice wavered beneath its veil of authority. "I have been informed there was a misunderstanding. Please remain calm. We will resolve this internally." Victor Hamilton closed his eyes, drew in a slow breath, then opened them. His gaze blazed, no longer the eyes of a passenger, but of a man who held enough power to alter the fate of an empire. "Internally," Victor repeated, his voice low but heavy as stone. "Robert, this has gone far beyond internal matters. This is racial discrimination, with living witnesses, recorded video, and hundreds of thousands watching live. How exactly do you plan to resolve it internally? Silence the world?" The silence that followed was taut as a drawn bowstring. Karen Douglas, the flight manager, gripped her iPad, palms slick with sweat. Melissa Turner collapsed into her seat, her face pale, mascara streaked across her cheeks. Richard Coleman held his forehead like a man who had lost everything. Robert Hale's breathing rasped through the line as he struggled to maintain authority. "We will investigate. We will issue appropriate disciplinary action." "No," Victor cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. "Investigations are stalling tactics. Discipline is a show to pacify outrage. I am not talking about punishing individuals. I am talking about systemic change." Every pair of eyes widened in shock. Sophia Reyes, live streaming with trembling hands, whispered, "Do you hear that? He isn't just demanding justice for himself. He is demanding change for the entire airline." The viewer count surged past 180,000, 200,000. Comments streamed in. "He's rewriting the rules." The Hamilton Protocol is born. Victor raised the merger documents high, the cabin light catching the embossed logo. "Robert, this $500 million deal is teetering on the edge. If you want Skyreach to survive, listen carefully to my 5 conditions." The cabin fell utterly silent, the only sound the thundering of hearts witnessing history. Victor raised one finger, his voice ringing out. "First, every employee involved in this incident, from the flight attendant to the supervisor to anyone complicit, will be terminated immediately. No suspensions, no reviews, terminated." Melissa burst into sobs. "Please, I have 3 young children." Victor turned, his eyes cold as steel. "You should have thought of them before you turned discrimination into routine. Children don't need a mother who makes excuses for prejudice. They need a mother who shows respect for human dignity." The air in the cabin grew suffocating. On the line, Robert Hale fell silent. The clattering of keyboards echoed faintly through the speaker, proof the board of directors was transcribing every word. Victor raised his second finger. "Second, every front-line employee, from ticketing to security to flight crew, will undergo unconscious bias training. Not an online box, checking course, but live, intensive programs led by human rights experts." Sweat trickled down Karen's temple. She knew the cost would be massive. She also knew refusal was suicide. Victor raised a third finger. "Third, all customer interactions will be recorded with body cameras. The data must be stored on an independent cloud system monitored by a Third party. No cover. Oops. No deletions. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Some passengers straightened in their seats, nodding. They understood this would redefine the flying experience. Richard Coleman leapt in, his voice dripping disdain. "You want to turn the airline into the police?" Victor fixed him with a razor smile. "No. I want to turn it into a responsible company. The average discrimination lawsuit costs $2.3 million. A global camera system, less than 1/10 of that. This is basic economics, Richard. But perhaps you never understood." Richard's face flushed crimson, his words caught in his throat. Victor raised a fourth finger. "Fourth, the airline will conduct monthly diversity audits. Reports must be made public, unaltered, and unhidden. If Skyreach evades this, I will liquidate all my shares and announce the reason. Systemic racial discrimination." Karen gasped. In her earpiece, operations control barked frantically. "Stock is still plummeting, down 11%. The board demands immediate updates." Victor raised his final finger, his gaze slashing through every excuse like a blade. "Fifth, all discrimination complaints must reach executive level within 24 hours. Any repeat offense will not be pinned on middle management alone. The entire board of directors will answer to shareholders and to the public." His words landed with the weight of a death sentence. The first-class cabin fell into a tomb, like silence. Those present understood they had just heard not merely personal demands, but a new constitution for the entire airline industry. On the line, Robert Hale exhaled heavily. His voice returned, ragged but resolute. "Mr. Hamilton, these 5 conditions, they will transform the entire company." Victor replied, his voice deep and resonant, tolling like a bronze bell. "Exactly. And if Skyreach does not transform, it will cease to exist." Sophia whispered to her live stream audience. "You just witnessed an airline forced to reform, mid-air." The viewer count soared past 250,000. Comments detonated. "Hamilton Protocol. Respect is power. This is history." And Victor sat quietly in seat 1A. A passenger once humiliated. Now the man rewriting the rules. The first-class cabin was silent after Victor Hamilton finished speaking. 5 conditions, 5 hammer strikes had fallen, leaving behind a heavy void. Everyone understood this was no longer an argument about a seat. It was a verdict against an entire system. On the line, the voice of CEO Robert Hale broke through, strained. "Mr. Hamilton, we need time to consider. These reforms will cost tens of millions of dollars." "We cannot." Victor cut him off, his voice slow, every word slicing like a blade through bone. "Robert, you have had years to fix this. I give you 90 days. If not, Washington Equity Partners will withdraw all capital. And I will make the reason public. Systemic racial discrimination." A deadly silence followed. Sophia Reyes lifted her phone closer, whispering, her voice trembling. "You heard it. He didn't just give conditions. He gave an ultimatum." The viewer count exploded. 300,000, 350,000 comments poured in. "This is corporate war. Hamilton just rewrote history. Respect is profit." Karen Douglas swallowed hard, her hands shaking. She knew Victor's words were not empty threats. She saw in his eyes the confidence of a man accustomed to wielding numbers powerful enough to shake markets. Melissa Turner buried her face in her hands, sobbing, each tear an indictment of her own role in sparking the storm. Richard Coleman gripped the armrest, his face pale. He had once believed his platinum card was the key to every door, but today he realized its value was dust compared to the power of the man he had just scorned. On the line, the clatter of keyboards echoed. Then another voice spoke. CFO. David Morrison. Mr. Hamilton, we've run preliminary numbers. The initial cost to implement these requirements is at least $18 million. At current margins, Skyreach will plunge into losses. Victor's expression did not change. He pulled another report from his leather case, holding it up to Sophia's camera, so hundreds of thousands could see. The bold figures gleamed under the cabin lights. David, last year, Skyreach lost $23.7 million to discrimination lawsuits, an average of $280,000 per case. And that's only the ones that surfaced. Today, this single incident could cost $2 million in legal fees. You call that saving money? I call that bleeding capital. The cabin trembled with shock. A few passengers clapped instinctively, then stopped, afraid to break the courtroom silence. Robert Hale's voice returned, ragged like a drowning man. Mr. Hamilton, we have no choice but to agree. But we need a public statement from you to salvage the company's image. Victor leaned slightly forward, his eyes blazing, his voice resonant and unyielding. Public? Very well. I will speak, here and now, through hundreds of thousands of live streams. He signaled Sophia to steady her camera, then looked directly into the lens, as though locking eyes with the entire world. Listen, Victor said, his voice ringing, each word etched like a blade into collective memory. This is not a story about money. This is a story about dignity. And in business, dignity is not just a moral value. It is the most sustainable asset. The cabin gasped. Sophia whispered, trembling, "Oh my God, he just turned a plain cabin into a global forum." The viewer count surged past 500,000. Comments erupted. Hamilton protocol now. Respect is profit. This man changed the game. Robert Hale's voice cracked with emotion. Mr. Hamilton, the Skyreach Airlines Board of Directors officially accepts your 5 conditions. We will sign the resolution today. Victor closed the merger file, a thin smile tracing his lips. He did not need to shout. He did not need to command. He simply sat, and the world revolved around him. In the cabin, Karen Douglas exhaled, her career dangling by a thread. Melissa Turner crumbled, her sobs mingling with the hum of the engines. Richard Coleman slumped, trembling. But Victor sat tall in seat 1A, his gaze fixed on the window. The wing shimmered in the sunlight, reflecting a new beginning. The storm called the Hamilton Protocol had officially formed. And from that moment forward, no airline, no service industry would dare underestimate the power of one word: dignity. The first-class cabin remained silent after CEO Robert Hale declared his acceptance of the 5 conditions. But it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a bomb that had just exploded, with smoke and dust still hanging in the air. Karen Douglas clutched her iPad, receiving a burning message from the ground. Replacement crew en route. Hold all positions. Replace immediately. She looked up, scanned the cabin, then quietly nodded. "Melissa Turner, Richard Coleman, please stand." Melissa sobbed, her eyes red and swollen, mascara smeared like ink stains. She clung to one last plea. "Please, I have 3 children." Karen bit her lip. She knew mercy was a luxury she could not afford in this moment. Power had shifted beyond her hands. The decision was no longer personal. It was an order from a system in upheaval. "Melissa, you are no longer a flight attendant of Skyreach. Gather your things and leave the cabin." Melissa collapsed to her knees, crying out. A few passengers lowered their eyes, unwilling to watch. But Sophia Reyes captured it all, her live stream exploding past 600,000 viewers. Comments poured in. "Accountability at last. Justice is happening. Slime. Hamilton changed everything." Richard Coleman stood frozen, his whole body trembling. The man who had once boasted of his $20 million deal now stood hollow. "You can't do this to me. I'm a platinum member. Karen cut him off coldly. "You have lost your privilege. Leave the cabin." Richard fell silent. He stumbled forward, each step like walking on thin ice. That image spread instantly. A platinum businessman stripped of privilege, leaving first class like a defeated man. Sophia whispered to her viewers, her voice shaking with awe. "You are witnessing history. Privilege erased, right here." Meanwhile, Victor Hamilton remained seated in 1A. His face was calm, his gaze distant, as if he had foreseen everything. He needed no grand gesture. His silence had become a hammer striking the entire system. On the ground, the financial markets quaked. On Wall Street screens, Skyreach shares plunged more than 12% in half an hour. CNN, Bloomberg, Reuters, all blared headlines. "Crisis at 30,000 feet. Skyreach faces investor backlash." Yet the collapse opened the door to recovery. When Sophia's video flooded social media, when the Hamilton Protocol became a global trend, investors recalculated. They realized that if Skyreach truly reformed, this could be a profitable turning point. The stock stopped falling. Then it surged. By the end of the day, the index rebounded, closing 4% higher than in the morning. A living proof of the truth Victor had just declared. Dignity is not only moral, it is profitable. In the cabin, passengers whispered to each other. The woman in 3A gripped her husband's hand, her eyes wet. He's not just fighting for himself. He's fighting for all of us. Sophia turned her camera toward Victor. He sat quietly, a copy of the Financial Times neatly placed on the tray table. That image, simple yet powerful, instantly became an icon. In the ground control room, a staffer's voice rang in Karen's headset. #Hamilton Protocol is climbing straight to #1 worldwide. Over 3 million posts in 1 hour. Karen drew a deep breath, knowing her career would never be the same. But deep down, she could not deny one truth. She had just witnessed the birth of a new order. Melissa was escorted out in tears. Richard disappeared through the door, his figure bent and broken. But Victor remained seated, a mountain standing firm after the storm. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, Flight 892 is preparing for takeoff. Please take your seats." Yet every passenger knew this flight had already left the runway of history. It was not just carrying people from New York to Seattle. It was carrying a revolution. Sophia turned the camera toward herself, tears glistening. Everyone, this is no longer just one man's story. This is the opening chapter of a new era. An era where every business must understand. Respect pays dividends. Discrimination carries a price. The live stream soared past 1 million viewers at once. Comments exploded. Hamilton for president. Dignity is profit. This is the new law. In seat 1A, Victor closed his eyes gently. He did not smile. He did not look triumphant. He simply sat in silence, like a man who knew that everything was only beginning. Because from this day forward, the world would have to remember 2 words: Hamilton Protocol. 6 weeks after Flight 892, the Seattle headquarters of Sky Reach Airlines had transformed into a massive reform machine. On the 32nd floor, the boardroom that once gleamed with profit reports had become a punch for revolution. Dr. Alicia Monroe, 42, a sociologist newly appointed as the first chief diversity officer in the airline's history, stood before a giant LED screen. Her voice rang out, clear and firm. 94% of airports have equipped frontline staff with body cameras. In 6 weeks, the number of discrimination complaints, 0. An unprecedented figure. At the end of the table, CEO Robert Hale sat in silence, his hair grayer by the day. Beside him, COO Jennifer Liu scribbled furiously, knowing that every report could now serve as evidence or as a shield. Dr. Monroe switched to a new slide. 100% of employees have completed anti-bias training. 78% admitted to having unconscious prejudice. More than half reported their perspective has changed after the program. The truth landed on the table like stones, stripping away the facade the system had long hidden behind. On the live stream screen from Chicago, Victor Hamilton appeared. He wore a charcoal suit and navy tie, seated in the office of Washington Equity Partners, with Lake Michigan shimmering in the afternoon sun behind him. He didn't need to slam the table or raise his voice. His presence alone commanded silence. Dr. Monroe, Victor leaned toward the camera, his voice deep and steady. What about customer data? A young woman rose, Maria Santos, 29, the very passenger who had live-streamed that day. Now she was director of customer experience. Her eyes shone, her voice confident. Customer satisfaction has risen 47%, from 2.4 stars to 4.3 out of 5. Ticket sales from minority communities have jumped 89%, and through word of mouth alone, revenue has increased by $67 million. Victor nodded slightly, a thin smile curving his lips like a green checkmark on a balance sheet. Good. You have understood the simple lesson. Respect pays. A year later, Harvard Business School added the case to its curriculum. The first slide showed Victor seated calmly in 1A, while Melissa Turner pointed accusingly. Below it read, "Power is not granted. Power is recognized when used with purpose." Around the world, the Hamilton Protocol became a standard. Lufthansa in Europe announced its adoption. In Japan, the largest hotel chain launched a scholarship fund for minority employees inspired by Victor. In South Africa, a mining conglomerate established an anti-discrimination hotline, even deep underground. In the U.S. Congress, the Dignity and Commerce Act was passed, mandating all federal service companies to conduct anti-bias training, publish complaint reports, and establish direct reporting channels to executives. One senator declared, "Flight 892 proved that justice is not only moral, it is an economic foundation." Skyreach's Seat 1A became a symbol. The airline affixed a small silver plaque. Seat 1A, birthplace of the Hamilton Protocol. Respect is our core value. Travelers came from around the world to take photos, posting them online with the hashtag #RespectIsProfit. The seat became a living monument to the moment when a lone passenger rewrote the global rulebook. Melissa Turner, after being fired, fell into despair. But she later entered a scholarship program funded by Washington Equity. 3 years later, she became a law student specializing in human rights. At a seminar, she confessed, "I once used this hand to point and humiliate. Now, I want to use it to protect those who are humiliated." Richard Coleman published a memoir titled "The Seat I Didn't Deserve," recounting his fall from platinum to disgrace. The book became a bestseller, a public confession to society. 18 months after Flight 892, Victor Hamilton took the stage at TED Global. The lights fell on his salt and pepper hair, his eyes deep with conviction. His voice resonated. "Power does not reside in the highest seat, but in ensuring anyone can sit in the seat they paid for. Change does not begin in a luxurious boardroom, but in the moment we dare to say no to injustice. And remember, in the 21st century, discrimination is not only a moral sin, it is a massive financial liability." The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Thousands stood, tears in their eyes. In Chicago, Victor sat silently in his office, the city lights dancing on Lake Michigan. On his desk lay an old paper ticket, Seat 1A, laminated like a relic. Not to remember the humiliation, but to honor the power of a moment when silence was broken. He whispered, just loud enough for himself, "Power is not shouting louder. Power is making the world fall silent to hear the truth." The legacy of Flight 892 had risen far beyond the skies. It did not just change an airline, it redefined the very concept of profit. Dignity is the most sustainable asset. And from Seat 1A, a global movement took flight. Seat 1A on Flight 892 seemed like just an ordinary seat. But from the moment Victor Hamilton was dismissed, it became a symbol of the truth that dignity cannot be bought, cannot be stripped away, and when one person dares to stand firm, an entire system must change. From a confrontation in the sky, the Hamilton Protocol became a global standard. It proved something that should have been simple all along. Respect pays, discrimination costs. And perhaps the most memorable part is not in the millions of dollars, nor in the rise and fall of stocks, but in the truth that sometimes one person simply sitting in the seat they rightfully deserve is enough to ignite a revolution. If you believe dignity must always come before profit, hit like to help this story travel further. If you want to continue following stories of justice and resilience, subscribe to the channel today. And leave a comment with the words, "Respect first," so the world knows we are building a future where fairness is not just a promise, but the rule of the game.